So for those of you who don't know, Green Home NYC is an all volunteer run organization based out here in New York City and a little bit, remote right now. In general, we have 3 branches within Green Home. We have the Green Careers that you're attending today, which usually is a format of a panel discussion with experts or people who are in a career, such as community action. And we'll kind of give a little bit of their background and share some tips and tricks on, how you could possibly get into it as well, or just share their insight. In addition, we have the forums group. They also host events once a month usually on the 3rd Wednesday, but sometimes those are, they change with experts on particular discussions this month as well. It's February 17th. It's also on community action with different speakers talking about what they do and how to get involved. And last but not least is the Green Home Tours group. Although, in a time where social distancing is very important, we still have managed to have some tours events virtually where we've been able to see different facilities. So stay tuned, have a look at our website, follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook to keep up to date with all of our events. So let's see now, how many people have kind of filed in. We've got a pretty good amount here, and we'll slowly start to
I can't hear Lois. I don't know what the others can.
Oh, hello? Were you not able to hear me? Wonderful. So we'll start over. Probably didn't hear my spiel either. Can you hear me now? Yeah. So as I was saying, welcome to Green Home NYC's Green Careers event on community action. Today we have a panel discussion with 4 experts in community action that are working in community action. For those of you who don't know, Green Home NYC is an all volunteer run organization. We also have 2 other kind of branches within Green Home NYC, apart from Green Careers, including the Forums group, who's actually hosting an event on February 17th on community action. The forums in general will take a subject and get experts on the matter to kind of further discuss it. So a little different, to a career focus. And last but not least is the tours group. You'd think that in a time of social distancing, we wouldn't have any events, but we have actually managed to have a couple of events through virtual tours, and we're looking forward to doing more. So keep a lookout on our Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook page, subscribe to our newsletter. I'll share that information towards the end for more updates on further and future events. That being said, I think we can start. I definitely want to encourage people to ask questions. We will ask to just kind of hold your questions to the end. You can raise your hand and unmute yourself and just ask the speaker or the panelists as a whole together. If you're feeling a bit shy, that's okay. You can either send a message to my co-volunteer Crystal or Emily, and they will ask on your behalf. So that said, I'd like to introduce Nicole Pavez, David Avina, Phoebe Flaherty, and Patrick Owusu, who will be speaking today. So we'll kind of take it alphabetical order. Unfortunately, we're not in person, so I can't really point to you. So we'll start off with David. You know, if you could just give us a little bit of an intro, you know, what you're doing now, your current role, the organization, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. My name is David Avina. I work with UHAB, the Urban Homesteading Assistance Board. I work in the Member Services Department, where we help limited equity co-ops with a variety of different things, from accounting, loan packaging, acquiring solar panels, getting some information about utility programs. So our organization is really dedicated to helping out the specific sector of affordable housing. And we've been doing it for about now 45-ish years, since the 70s. And there's a long history kind of tied together between the history of affordable housing and housing laws in New York City and our organization. And it's really great to be able to work with UHAB. Right now, some of the focus that I'm doing and my team is working with the Cobsco solar team to get affordable solar panels on the rooftops of some HDFCs, some co-ops. Actually work with Patrick's organization to do that work. We're state sponsored to do that work, and yeah, it's really good. Another focus is electrification, and if you don't know what that is, it's basically just to make things electric. So in New York City, a lot of buildings, if most buildings are heated by fossil fuels, so gas, oil, and electrification is just a conversion from that fossil fuel to electric heating or cooling. And so we're helping low-income neighborhoods make that transition and making sure that they're getting access to the technology, not after market saturation, but before. And so that's really important for that idea of a just transition, and definitely energy democracy and equity. Yeah, that's a little bit about me. I guess I'll throw it back to Luis.
Thanks. No, that is, yeah, definitely community action. So up next is Nicole. Again, a little bit about what you're doing now, your role, and a little bit about the organization. Please take it away.
Yes, of course. Well, my name is Nicole. I'm a bilingual community organizer with We Act for Environmental Justice. Our main goal is to empower and organize low-income communities in Northern Manhattan so that they can build healthy communities for all. And I started there in June. It's my first job out of grad school. So it's kind of interesting joining in the middle of a pandemic. But I've really enjoyed my time at We Act, and as a community organizer, I have the opportunity to speak with, we have like a membership. And so it's nice to be able to communicate with our members and be able to work on different projects as well. So most of my work involves, membership outreach and retainment, and then also working on different projects in East Harlem, or working on one specific one that I'm working on right now is called Community Power. I'm actually working with Solar One on this project, and Con Edison as well. It's kind of like a solar co-op, and so we are installing solar panels over at some New York City public housing building, one in Northern Manhattan, and then one building in Brooklyn. And so we're targeting like a low to moderate income residents in those areas so that they can join the co-op, and they wouldn't receive like energy directly to their building, but they do receive solar credit on their Con Edison bill. And so that's kind of what a large portion of my time goes towards that project. And with COVID, it has been a little difficult, and it definitely exacerbates kind of like the digital divide and how that continues to affect people. But yeah, so I've been at We Act for 6 months, and we just really focus on community involvement and engagement, and making sure that we also address different policy issues, whether that's federal or state.
Thank you, Nicole. That's really interesting. I've jotted something down to ask you later. So next up is Patrick. I did also hear, Patrick, that it might be your birthday today. So I would like to say happy birthday, and that's like true community dedication. You just, please take it away.
Yeah, it is my birthday. I got my lucky little rash guard underneath from side hobbies I used to do. Thanks. So yeah, I'm part of the Here Comes Solar team at Solar One. Solar One's like the enveloping organization, but on my team specifically, we work towards getting solar on multifamily buildings. We provide our expert technical assistance within this area, which historically hasn't seen as much solar development due to the amount of barriers from like the DOE, from FDNY clearance, and like any of those other things that people normally wouldn't have the time or the understanding to get through. We help them through the start of that process to the end where they finally get those solar installations. And on our team, like David said, we have the Cobsco Solar team, which is a partnership between Here Comes Solar and UHAB to help further solar pursuits for affordable housing, HCFC buildings within the New York City area. And we also have, as Nicole said, the community power side of our team, where we go around to help develop community solar projects, which in this case, community solar would be helping out low income housing residents that do best benefit from a reduction in their energy bills. But in general, to tie more to what I do, part of what I do is I do help individuals to learn more about community solar, which is an option for when buildings can't get solar or there's tenants, they don't own their roofs. Community solar is a great way to tap into solar energy to save on con-ed bills. And I help people to understand that process more. I also do solar designs for buildings like that might go through for David and our co-partnership, Cobsco Solar, or buildings in general that come through the pipeline. I do designs for that. Also get people informed about how solar works in general in the city. And I also, normally I'd be going to events and doing outreach, interfacing with community at community events with community members and things like that. But with COVID, it's been more digital, more virtual. It's fun in the beginning. It's a little wear and tear, but we're all hanging in there. We're doing our best.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, we all are hanging in there, that's for sure. So last but certainly not least, Phoebe.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Phoebe Flaherty. I'm an organizer at Align, and Align is an organization that works at the city level on campaigns at the intersection of economic justice and environmental and climate justice. And so my work there involves coordinating the Climate Works for All Coalition and the Transform Don't Trash Coalition, which are two coalitions where we work with labor, community organizations, environmental justice, climate organizations on goals to advance, move us towards our emissions reductions goals in New York City and create good green jobs and prioritize, environmental justice communities along the way, investment in communities along the way. And so with our Climate Works for All coalition, we actually have, we work with WeAct, and, I've worked with David at UHAB on that coalition as well. Both organizations have been super instrumental within the coalition. We previously worked on Local Law 97, the Dirty Buildings Bill, and with the power of the coalition, we're able to move the city council to pass that legislation. And since then, our focus before COVID had been, trying to get some funding for implementation at the city level. But since the crisis, have taken a step back and actually developed the equitable recovery platform that we're working on now. We have an equitable recovery report that details 7 different infrastructure project areas that we can invest in now as a city to create 100,000 green jobs, investing in environmental justice communities and communities of color around New York City, to put folks back to work and invest in green and emissions reducing projects in New York City. So that's our focus at the moment. You know, as a coalition, again, we work with organizations across the city, and we're trying to make this policy happen at a city level. And so we're working on some budget priorities from that equitable recovery for this spring, and we'll be talking to our city council members. We're also engaging candidates who are running for city council and mayor in the upcoming election. So we're having a mayoral forum on March 18th, where we're working with a bunch of groups and going to ask some questions that are important to the organizations around the table here. So everyone's invited. I can share that information afterwards. Be great to see you all there as we hold some of these candidates' feet to the fire with the questions that matter the most to us.
Nice. Yes, please. Thank you. And in general, to all of the panelists, please go ahead and, if you would like to share any of your information in the chat, so people can follow links and resources, that's definitely welcome. Thank you very much. I guess now we can kind of, the next set of questions, a little bit more personal about your journey. I'd really love to hear, what did you study, if you studied at a higher level, higher, and kind of, were you always within the sustainability field? Did you just kind of start elsewhere and pivot into it? And, just to keep things fresh, we're going to go backwards. I'll remember it alphabetically. We'll start with Phoebe and we'll go the other way.
Yeah, sure. So I actually have an organizing background. I graduated from college with just a politics degree and ended up working as a labor union organizer with SEIU Local 32BJ here in New York on the Airport Workers Campaign for a number of years, and then worked in Chicago as a coalition organizer for an immigration coalition in Chicago for a number of years as well. And as I was moving back to New York, made the pivot into climate, economic, and environmental justice campaigns with Align. So it was a transition for sure. We're still moving, similar things are moving policy at a city and state level, which I've done before, but the world of climate job creation is new to me. And there was a lot of new information to take in. And I think something that was helpful to me in that process is just like working in a coalition with a ton of folks, knowing that there are experts all around to tap into, and not feeling like you have to know all the answers yourselves, but knowing that you're supported with this community that has been doing this work for a really long time. And, there's just a lot of knowledge out there in the community that's easy to, tap into and figure out how to move things forward.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's true. Very important. Community action, coming together, just power in numbers. Thank you. Yeah. So Patrick, if you'd like to give us a little bit about your academic background, if you were always, community action, and how you got into it.
I went to school, Brooklyn College, to study Earth and Environmental Sciences. Originally, I thought I was going to be a scientist in general. Like something more like in the lab, or like maybe a field scientist in general. But as I progressed in like looking within jobs and things like that, some of the things that my teachers like told me, one of which struck me as a little odd at first, which was just because you have like the degree doesn't mean you have to do that thing. Like it's a degree, it's a way to open the door to many different possibilities. So I started to think of things like more broadly, and I started like trying out different jobs, different ways to work within the environmental career in general. And I've been like a field scientist, I've been a horticulturalist, I've even like strayed a little further away more towards like environmental like cleanup kind of thing, and like a chemical inventory specialist, that kind of stuff. And I was just trying out a bunch of different careers, but in particular, when I got placed within City Service Corps, which is a program under AmeriCorps, at Department of Sanitation, I met a former employee at Solar One who every now and then she'd just pop into the office, and like she would like talk with us, and somehow she'd always find a way to just slip in Solar One and how great it was working there. So eventually I looked into Solar One, and I was pretty amazed. Like Solar One as like the organization like embodies like the green workforce training, which is like training sometimes incarcerated inmates, but like individuals in general that need that extra lift in order to become a productive working member in society. Like they help to train in like terms of electrician for installing solar panels, like being a plumber, things like that. And then there's also the education team as well within Solar One, that K through 12 education program that they help to make sure that people get that proper STEM education in these the schooling system. And then they have like the Here Comes Solar team. And I was just shocked, like they're doing so much with such a small staff. So while I was in the chemical inventory, I applied there, hoping I get some news back, and got the good news after applying. Yada yada, and then I ended up here. It's been a fun journey though. I always like trying new things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, sometimes you just gotta try lots of different paths, if you like, you know, to figure out what you want. It's a process of elimination. And as we've all been able to tell, you know, there's a network here. So clearly starting in one place in New York City will end, you know, you can end up somewhere else and know someone. So, you know, it's really cool to see. So next up we'll have Nicole. You want to just give us a little background, you know, academic?
Yeah, of course. I guess I'd start off that I grew up in the Hudson Valley, and so the environment has always kind of been a huge part of my upbringing, especially with pollution in the Hudson River. And so I was part of the environmental club in high school, and just kind of had like a minimal, you know, like trying things out. And in college, I went to Brigham Young University, and I majored in political science and Latin American studies. And I was actually planning on pursuing a law degree. I was really interested in immigration law. But last year, like after I took the LSAT and after I applied to law schools, it just didn't really feel right. And I just didn't quite understand what I should be doing. And then I had a friend who was applying to master's programs in urban planning. And I looked into it and I was like, oh, wow, this kind of involves all the things that I enjoy doing. And it addresses a lot of issues with kind of like equity and equity here in the United States, and like a lot of things that pique my interest. So I applied to urban planning schools the following year, and I ended up going to the University of Utah. And you know, I took a lot of courses on sustainability, and did a specialization in urban design. And so when I graduated, I came back to New York. I had done an internship the previous summer at the Department of Sanitation here in the city. And so I really enjoyed living here in New York, but I also just really enjoyed being with sanitation. I was an intern at the Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability, and I was in charge of a program called Donate NYC. And so it was promoting reuse in New York City. And so just seeing how big of an agency sanitation is, and how key, like, you know, key policies that they implement are so influential here in the city, and also an example for cities across the United States. So, you know, the environment and like sustainability has always kind of been a part of what I study, but never like there were various interests that I had. And so I was looking for work, which kind of took a while, like a year after I graduated. And so with urban planning, it's kind of difficult sometimes because there's so many different directions you can go, whether that's like transportation planning or urban design or environmental sustainability. And so I was just applying to a lot of jobs, but I ran into WeAct, and what impressed me the most is just their mission to address equity issues, and then just bring resources to communities of color, and especially to communities in Northern Manhattan. And it just felt like a really good blending of, you know, of my past experience with community organizing as well, which I did quite a bit of in grad school and in my undergrad with internships. And so that's kind of like why I joined We Act, but it always has been a part of my life. And I attended a lot of events like this when I was looking for work, and it was just really helpful to find people within the field and just develop a passion for it as well.
Thank you for that. No, it definitely sounds, that you've, at least to date, you've merged the Latin American studies, the ability to speak another language, law in the sense of, the justice and the equity, and bringing in, like your previous experience in the Department of Sanitation. Like, that's it. You never know where you're going to end up, and how all of these skills and experiences are going to kind of mold you and help you figure out your path. So no, thank you for sharing that. I've also got some notes for you to ask later. So David, last but not least this time, please take it away.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I should start by saying I'm originally from LA. I'm from the East LA area. And yeah, I guess talking about the academic background, I wasn't a good student, and so I started with community college. I'd spent, I don't know, 3-ish years in community college, going through that cycle. And then I ended up luckily transferring to Cal, and going to their College of Natural Resources there. And I got so I've been studying environmentalism really for a long time at that point. And at Cal, I was able to kind of tap into the Chicano Studies department there, while also taking my biology and environmental problem solving classes and stuff. And so I was able to get more of an interest into that intersectionality between, who I am as a person, but also kind of something that I had a passion for. And so, after leaving school, I wanted to try something different. I've been in California my whole life, so I decided to come out here to New York, and really started, I guess you could say, I really started from the bottom. I had no money, and I started as a barista like 2 months after I started here, right? So going from a large university with, a lot of name recognition to working behind the counter, making some lattes for people that actually work on Wall Street, ironically enough. Yeah, and then I started going to, I was able to get a job at Big Reuse, also working contracted by the Department of Sanitation. So that really is a huge network in this city if you want to start in something sustainability. But yeah, I was working there for a while, and I decided I needed a change, and I wanted to go to, I think UHAB was a good fit, because it's very different, right? And so it had nothing to do with environmental anything when I started. But I definitely saw that environmental justice piece in within the housing justice work that they do, right? And so I was able to push the organization to really say it out loud. The work that they do is environmental justice, and also the work that I'm doing personally is trying to make sure that the door that I seem to have open is still open when I leave, right? And make sure that the capabilities and abilities that I have of being able to speak Spanish, speaking to the New York City community, is not lost when I leave. And I guess going back a little bit, I could relate to Patrick. I also, in college, I really started more as a naturalist, and I wanted to be a lab coat scientist studying, animals and bugs and all that sort of stuff. And then I realized it really is really hard, and it's also that research in labs is very difficult and very specific. So I thought I wanted to do something easier. And so I started going more to the social side of things. And I guess the more I found myself in my studies, like I said, the Chicano studies and other sort of literature that I didn't get in high school, in public school, I started navigating more towards the social aspect of environmentalism rather than the hard quantitative science part of it. But I still take that I guess approach in my work now. I still kind of try to make sure that we talk about things with a larger climate crisis context in mind, because I feel like New York definitely is an urban city that sometimes gets bogged down on the really urban side of it when there's not much of the natural spaces, right? And so I try to make sure to contextualize it sometimes with my team and open that conversation up and not try to be in that New York City bubble. I think that any big city or any sort of ecosystem would have itself.
Definitely, thank you. And I think that's a pretty good segue in terms of the qualitative versus the quantitative. I myself, I had no idea what I wanted to get into sustainability until I was actually practicing yoga, whatever cliche, in India, and I saw the issue of electrification there and thinking, access, right? And I myself do not have a science background. So I found a degree that was interdisciplinary. It was a little more focused on the social, and it was, the title Energy, Society, and Sustainability. And what I'm hearing, here, and I'd like to ask each of you, it's kind of how do you define community action or community activism or community organizing, and, in terms of the society part, how do you engage with people? I understand now with COVID, it's a totally different thing. But in general, what does community action mean to you and how do you engage? And we'll start with you, David, kind of working backwards again.
Yeah, that's a good question because it's something also that I've struggled with because I don't consider myself a community organizer by any means, just because I feel like I don't particularly like to community organize. But I'm very good at community engagement. I'm very good at talking to my community, and like talking to the random grandmas that I just always encounter with my work is cool. I like to do that. And it's, I think the most important part of any job, because you're supposed to be able to, talk to those that aren't really talked to that often, right? But I guess if I were to define community action, I guess it's more of a, it's more genuine communication between like an institution and I guess, for lack of a better word, regular folk, that are just kind of in the community and living their daily lives. Some of the ways I think I try to participate in that community action is really just to bring down the professional language to layman's term and how the community speaks, and not get caught up in the acronyms or the esoteric language and vocabulary that I think professionalism really makes you participate in. I'm not a big fan of being super professional just because it's not the most accessible language. I didn't grow up in a very professional home. I don't think any of us did, but you learn that language as you start to work. And I think breaking those kind of limitations of professionalism, I guess, is a good way to kind of start talking to the community and start working with people that aren't like yourself and being in uncomfortable situations, because I think being in a professional situation means that everyone's comfortable, but sometimes that's not the best thing for the situation or whatever movement or campaign, whatever you need to do. You need to have those uncomfortable conversations, or else the status quo is going to stay the same and there's no action in that community, or be a little cheesy, I guess, for your question.
No worries. I mean, cheesy is probably, there's a reason why it exists. It gets us. And no, I appreciate that. And I thank you, for redefining what it is that you particularly think you do, community engagement, and, also defining community action in your own way. We really do appreciate that. And I think the professionalism that you're saying, I understand it myself. And, it'll kind of lead me now to Nicole, who I want to hear from as well. But it sounds like, professionalism is a barrier. And Nicole, you mentioned the digital divide. So I do want to hear, community action, your definition, or redefine it however you want. And yeah, you want to hear about the digital divide as well.
Yeah, so for me, community action is gathering people together to amplify their voices to create change. And I feel like during this time of COVID, it's really difficult to gather physically. So you have to find ways of gathering digitally and how you can create change and make an impact um, in like through digital platforms. And I feel like with the digital divide, it makes it really complicated because it kind of like, for example, we have our membership meetings once a month and we bring in experts on different topics. Like in August, we had people come in and speak about affordable housing. And then we had someone come in to talk about education during the pandemic. So there's different, topics that we cover to for the community. And sometimes it's difficult for people to join Zoom, or they don't know how to use it, or they don't have a smartphone or a computer. Some people don't have email addresses. So it's just really difficult to do outreach to those particular groups of people. And then also kind of just seeing how even I don't know what it was like before COVID and what outreach was like, especially like at WeAct, how outreach, like I imagine it was really different from what it is now. And like from what I hear, it's a lot of tabling and a lot of, like events, in-person events, and like creating those relationships in person. But it's difficult to create those events, in like a digital space. And so we have to kind of think creatively to find ways to get people's attention so that they're interested in attending events. And so like this year we made our topics kind of more COVID related so that people are like, oh, okay, like I'm getting, like it's not just there's like a sustainable aspect to it, but it's also kind of meeting people halfway so that they kind of are introduced to sustainability, because a lot of people haven't heard about environmental sustainability, or like when I'm talking about solar energy, not many people know about like it's kind of a hard concept to describe sometimes. And so like community solar, it's just very difficult to explain and to someone who's like never heard of it before. And so I think just being able to introduce in like small quantities just different types of elements of sustainability and kind of like making it relatable and having it relate to their life. Like, okay, right now we're struggling with the pandemic and housing affordability and like education at like my kids, like what is school going to be like this year? So there's just like several aspects that COVID has kind of highlighted for different communities. And I feel like after COVID, community organizing will most likely look like a mix of digital organizing and then also in-person events. But for me, it's just gathering people together to amplify their voices and just create change.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for highlighting it. I mean, it's apparent that this digital age that we live in, it's definitely affecting lower income families, people who didn't need to have access to this before. And as you said, COVID is highlighting other things. I mean, we're all well aware of that. And if we're not like, okay, pull back the curtain, like there are issues. And wow, I really respect the way that you guys at WeAct have kind of pivoted to really meet people halfway, kind of as David said, to remove some of the professionalism and just and meet people halfway. Thank you for sharing about that. Patrick, please go ahead and let us know what you think community action is for you.
Community action has definitely changed because of COVID. Before COVID, and even like times way before that, community action for Here Comes Solar was as simple as making a solarize campaign, where we would go to like a general neighborhood and like try to get as many buildings as possible interested in solar. So when they purchase it as a group, it's cheaper for like everyone involved, that kind of thing. And I know my organization, I wasn't around for it, but my organization worked with UHAB to do like a solar uptown now campaign within Harlem, within the Harlem area, pretty close to where I live actually, around the 140s and Broadway in the Amsterdam Middle area. But anyways, these kind of tasks, when you do things like that, that's a form of community action and like in a sense community organizing as well. And things like that don't happen as well as they like now as they would have in the past, because there's no in-face meeting, interpersonal communication on that sense. It's all through technology. And there's something like understated about like being able to look someone in the eye, like maybe even give a handshake or just like sitting down with someone to really like be able to make that connection happen. And when we're talking about like community, you know, we can have like many Zoom calls and we know like this person is like a part of like our network, a part of like our general like setting, but it doesn't have like that same like impact like in this digital age as it does like in person. So you know, community action, activism, organizing, getting people in forums, getting people to act, getting people to like work with other people in their like community to make like things, in our case, in my case, a solar project like happen and possible. It's possible now as it was before. It's just a little different. And yeah, there was a lot of tabling with trying to get a community activism going on, tabling, going out to events, talking, interfacing. I do miss that. It's a great way to like know more about New York City in general when you get to do things like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you know, you said some body language. It's really important, especially when you're approaching people who may have never heard, as Nicole said. You know, what is solar? I don't know. And sometimes, like, I feel a little pretentious, like over Zoom. Like, I feel like you know, you're only seeing this part of me. You're not really getting like who I am, even though I'm trying. So I can imagine for all of you, you know, you community organizers, engagers, educators, the in-person environment is big. I appreciate that. Phoebe, lastly, you know, I feel like you'll give us a good definition of community action.
Yeah. So yeah, as I mentioned, I have a background in organizing, come from labor union organizing, and I actually grew up in a labor union household. My mom was a union organizer in Pennsylvania. She organized nursing home workers. In the town where I grew up. So from a very young age, I was like going along with her to picket lines and strikes and sitting in the back seat while she was handing out signs, and folks were coming together to build power and create change for themselves. And, you know, that's the very basic tenet and basis of community organizing and collective power, is people coming together to build power, to demand change, to win change, and, you know, directly impacted people making these decisions about things that impact themselves. You know, and so I think that's the kind of philosophy that I try to bring together with me, you know, from the direct on the ground organizing experience I have with labor previously, and like community organizing with an immigration coalition, to this kind of more, a little bit policy heavy, like climate jobs campaign that we're working on, where it's kind of like a little bit, you know, higher level policy stuff. But I think, you know, the basic tenet is folks who are being impacted should in some way be represented around the table. And yes, we do have policy folks at the table and folks helping us figure out the technicalities of what we actually should be asking for and how to make it happen. But we also have organizations like We Act and New York City Environmental Justice Alliance and some of their members like Uprose, who every day are having conversations with community members and feeling what the pain of community members are at this moment and what the real issues are, and bringing us back to that as a coalition and holding us accountable to, no, we can't just steamroll forward ahead. We have to think about what's actually impacting folks here and now, and bring that together different perspectives. There's not always agreement from different communities around New York about what the main priority is, but it's about bringing together all those perspectives and trying to, you know, come together and create policies that that work for the majority of folks, and hearing from the organizations that are on the ground doing that work as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Obviously, different stakeholders, different opinions, different priorities. You know, I was curious because of your background with labor unions, and also now having pivoted, you know, more into the green jobs. You know, how do you see kind of community organizing or organizing in general? You know, when more green jobs are available. You know, union representation has historically been important. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a ton of opportunity with what we're trying to do here. Like, part of our platform that we're working on, the equitable recovery with Climate Works for All, is about, you know, not only just creating these new green jobs, but about creating training programs and apprenticeship pipelines, and making sure that it's not only, you know, right now in the trades that are doing a lot of this work, it is kind of like male and white dominated, but it doesn't need to be that way, and we can change that. And so creating opportunities for folks within environmental justice communities and New York's communities of color to have access to these new jobs that we're trying to create. We're creating the new jobs. We have to put the emphasis on creating opportunities for all New Yorkers, and not just the folks who are traditionally having access to these jobs. And I think, you know, in some cases where labor is a willing partner on this, or already existing like trade unions and labor is an existing partner, and sometimes we got to push them. And it's just a part of the process of having a big tent and working with lots of folks. But, you know, it's about pushing, pulling folks along, coming together collaboratively to create these, what should be, you know, make sure that we're doing this the right way, which is creating jobs for folks who are impacted and on the front lines of the climate crisis already.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking a few years ago when I told my aunt and uncle that I want to be working in sustainability, they're like, what? I don't even understand. You know, of course, they're Greek, they live in Greece, they have a different type of education. So yeah, I mean, there's clearly plenty of work to be done in all sectors and all levels related to sustainability, you know, as an umbrella term. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. So, you know, I was kind of wondering in general, in terms of people that might be listening and those who might listen later to this video, what type of advice, you know, would you be giving to someone looking into, you know, getting into sustainability, but maybe they do want to have a focus, you know, within community action, engagement, education, organizing, you know, what type of advice would you give them? I'm sorry, Phoebe, please.
Sure. Yeah, I think my advice is for folks who don't have experience in like climate infrastructure or whatever, don't be intimidated. There's a ton of expertise that already exists in the communities that we work with. And, you know, there's a great sense of collaboration and folks are like in this together to move this work forward. And I think there's just like, you know, a great opportunity for folks to jump into this and a lot of support out there for newer folks and a lot of existing knowledge that you don't have to know everything from the beginning and can kind of slowly make your way and make your contributions as you go through.
Yes, thank you. And, you know, if you have any more resources, please feel free to drop them in the chat, you know, publications, things, pages that people should be following to get more information. So Patrick, what, you know, tips, tricks, advice would you give some of maybe the struggles you had in getting into it? Although you had a natural science background, not everyone does, you know, how can they get involved?
It definitely helps to just talk with people and to like make friends, hear other people's stories, ask questions, and just be curious in general. Like that's a big part of how I got to where I am. And another thing that sometimes isn't really stated enough. And like I really like connected with David through his talk of his travels from the other side of the country to here. Like your grade is like you're worth more than your GPA essentially. Like it's just a number in a sense. Like if you're going in a professional setting, then yes, you know, like GPA, oh, it has to be high. But like in the general like work order sense, like you're more than what a number says you are. And you know, if you're social, if you're you know amiable, if you're easily liked, if you like talking to people, like you know, play to your strengths and like just build on yourself as a person in addition, because like I don't know who else like applied for the job that I applied to, but I know that I got picked, you know, and I know that like I didn't have on my resume like a summa cum laude, you know, with the greatest of honors in Latin. But I got picked, which means something, which means like, you know, they looked beyond like what I got and where I went to school at, and they looked at me as a person. And I think overall we're seeing that a lot more in jobs in general. They're looking at the person more than like the pedigree. So that's something I would say, like build on yourself as well as like learn. And also just you know join a local community organization like Newtown Creek Alliance. It's not that close to me, but like they're an amazing organization. They do a lot of community and civic engagement, things like that. So just you know join an organization, build your network.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a really good point. I mean, a lot of people, maybe not so much in the city, but they were getting involved in local, you know, in gardening. And I thought of that as well, like, oh, you know, maybe some outdoor gardening within local co-ops, you know, it's a really good way to get to know people and just hear. So yeah, there's so many organizations. New York City is full of them, lots of local ones. That's a great point. Thanks for reminding us that as well. As being just true to yourself, you know, like. All right, Nicole. Yeah.
Great. Well, as you can see, there's not like one direct path into the sustainability field. And it feels like there, you know, like it doesn't, depending on your skills, you know, you can study something more technical like engineering or architecture or, you know, stuff like that. Or you could do something that's more kind of like project management oriented. So you study something that gives you those skills that are transferable to those types of positions. And so, and you know, that's how I feel like my background, at least with like political science and Latin American studies, even though, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to do with environmental justice or, you know, you still learn the skills of critical thinking and just being able to like assess data and the world around you and kind of like synthesize information from that. And so there's not one way to get into sustainability, but I think one key factor to at least stand out is your involvement in the community that you live in or where you're going to school, just developing a tie to your community, like a connection to like the physical community itself. Like, oh, this is the park I love going to. This is, you know, I've loved living here, but also just being invested. Like you can go to community board meetings, you can be a part of different nonprofit organizations and see like what they have to offer, if they have like membership meetings or volunteer opportunities, or and even, you know, meetings like this. Like when I was looking for work, I would go to panels and then I would email every single panelist and I was like, oh, what you did was really interesting. Like, can we, like before COVID, I'd be like, can we go out for coffee? And that was always really helpful because then, you know, even if it didn't lead to something else like a job or like, I don't know, but you learn more information from people, and the more people you talk to, just the more you understand of like, oh, I would like to do that. So, but yeah, so that's just kind of my approach with it.
Yeah, no, of course. You know, everyone has a different skill set, and reaching out to different people just to ask them their experience. That's why we kind of host these type of panels. So, you know, people can hear this, and just reaching out even now on LinkedIn, like, it is what it is, unfortunately, but yeah, thanks. So David?
Yeah, I guess I would definitely add on to what Patrick said, like lean into your own strengths, because then you're just trying to imitate someone that you're not, you know, and then at some point you're either going to get burned out or found out, you know. But definitely lean into your own strengths. I think for me personally, if I were to be like hiring somebody, you know, believe it or not, the one thing that I would personally look for is customer service experience, because if I know that if you were a customer service worker, that you know how to take BS, you know how to work hard, and you know how to just kind of work through the pain and do the work, right? And you know how to talk to people at the very least. You know how to talk to people with a smile on their face, even though you don't feel like smiling that day. Customer service is a very underrated experience, and really looked down upon. But man, if it's not like incredibly useful, because you could tell when people don't have customer service experience. So that's one thing I would say. If you're, you know, if you're behind the counter doing anything like that, it's not a waste of time. It's really good work. Also, when Nicole's saying, you know, talk to as many people as you can. You know, I would consider myself a young professional, barely getting started in the field. So I'm really reaching out to folks that are, you know, have sort of paved the way for me. Because, you know, I didn't have environmental club in high school. I didn't have those connections in college. I still don't have those connections now. But I try to talk to as many people as possible to try to get an idea of, you know, what the landscape looks like, what the ecosystem looks like. I think, you know, this panel is a perfect example of what the ecosystem looks like in New York City. You know, Solar One and WEAC Align, they are all connected with the majority of the very like heavy hitters in environmental justice in New York City. And yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? That's kind of why we're all here together, even though we work together in different areas. But yeah, leading to your strengths, kind of talk about like those unique experiences that you've been part of, and also, I guess, lift up those experiences that you don't think are important. You know, I think for me, speaking Spanish was super normalized. You know, I was from LA, East LA. 90% of the people speak Spanish as a second language. I was English as a second language up until like 10 years old. You know, but here in New York City, apparently it's a sought after skill. You know, who knew? In a very diverse city. So yeah, lean into those things that I guess you don't think make you unique, because most likely they do. And I don't know, just try to find that passion. I guess just last thing I would say is in respects to environmentalism and environmental justice, it applies to everything. I was with Big Reuse working with sanitation, right? So I was talking about trash and waste. Right now I'm with UHAB working with housing. I didn't know anything about a co-op. I said that in my interview. I don't know anything about co-ops, but they hired me anyway because I was able to work. And so maybe my next job, I'm thinking about doing something in transportation. I don't know anything about transportation except how to drive, you know? So you know, environmentalism is a very, very diverse field, but they're all kind of components that build upon each other, right? Your house has waste you drive to your home, even through transportation and like public transportation rather. It's all interconnected, and if you know kind of bits and pieces of one thing, you're able to expand and be more be a generalist sort of thing. And I think that's kind of what I lean on.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally second the service industry. Most of my work, you know, before getting the job that I'm at now was service industry, and I really lean into that as well. And yeah, you make a good point that most likely what you think is normal is probably not normal to someone else. So may as well, kind of lean into that. Yeah, no, you guys are all very, very inspiring. I'm really, really impressed. And, I guess I kind of want to end it with this kind of last question, and then we can open it up to the questions for the audience. I was actually going to ask you what's a frustrating aspect of your field, but I don't really want to focus on that unless you feel like you want to say something. I was actually going to ask, what's one of the most touching, kind of inspiring aspects of your field? And we'll start with you, David, just to keep that flow going back and forth.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm the kind of person that just kind of keeps my head down and just works. That doesn't really capture the moment that I'm in. But I guess if I were to reflect right now, one of the cool things about working at UHAB is that I'm like genuinely working with people and like their lives and livelihoods, and so when I'm able to impact that in a positive way, that's really cool. It's really cool. I'm not invested in like, I'm not really invested in like their lives or their building, but I just care about, doing something good for the person that's on the other side of the phone or Zoom call or whatever. And I just try to use the information that I have and I've been given and share that with somebody, whether it's a workshop or, technical assistance call or, whatever it is. And, some of the work that we do, Patrick and I with Cobsco Solar, it has impact decades from now. So it's really cool. I think it's really, really cool.
No, that's awesome. It's like waves, the ripple effect for sure. Nicole, what's inspiring? Let's focus on the positives.
Well, I was going to say that sometimes as a community organizer, you have to experience a lot of rejection. But so that's always kind of difficult. But when you do get someone that is really appreciative of the type of work that you do, like the other day, someone sent like a little note, like thanking me and my supervisor for like the work that we've been doing, especially during this time, like where people feel really isolated. And so when I have those experiences, it just feels really gratifying to me, knowing that creating community, like physical space is so important. And that's why I studied urban planning, but also like community also exists within like what we make of it. And so I feel like when we're addressing issues with like sustainability or, different issues involving equity, like maintaining that community even during difficult times is just always important. And for me, it's just been really gratifying to get to know people who are just so passionate.
Nice, thank you. Patrick. Sorry, I'm just so inspired here. I'm sighing because you're plucking at my heartstrings.
No worries. I gotta say, what's inspiring is it also does hurt, like Nicole said, when projects fall through or when people like kind of drift out of your work life, so to speak, as a potential project. But when they come back and they're like, we're ready, we're gonna go solar, we're going through with the process, and like we actually go from start to finish, and we even get to take like, I haven't done it yet, but like I've seen like the pictures of my colleagues and like project managers like on the rooftops of these projects completed and like actually standing next to the solar. It's like really inspiring, and I love like seeing that be the end result. And in general, like every time like I'm talking with someone and they actually are receptive to what I'm to like solar in general in the city, or even if they leave and they're just like, wow, I never like thought solar was really possible in this city. It seems like it's so cloudy, and like I'm able to turn around their perspective in that sense. Like that's always like rewarding to me. It's not always just like getting that project completed. Sometimes it's just like educating someone.
Nice. Phoebe?
Yeah, I mean, I think big picture, like got into this work because I want to have an impact on my community. I want to be a good community member. And that's a driving force. But I think day to day too, like there's just a lot of joy in this work in terms of working collaboratively with folks and really, you know, being impressed and inspired every day when folks are willing to give me the time to educate me on issues and share information and resources and brainstorm and, you know, the building of relationships with other folks across the city as we move this work forward together is just like really exciting and, you know, is the joy of the work day to day as well.
Nice. Thank you all, you know, for sharing, you know, your personal journey and your experience, and I hope, you know, it motivated most of the people on this call. It definitely motivated me. I'd like to, you know, open it up for general questions. If any of the audience members would like to ask a specific question, they can unmute themselves and ask. Otherwise, maybe Emily, you've been gathering some of the questions that people have sent in to you, and we can ask the general group.
It looks like someone has their hand raised.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Hi, Paul.
Hello, my name is Paul Rivers. I sometimes frequent the Green Home events, and I find that the networking extremely helpful. And I was just listening to all of your comments, and I was thinking, wow, it's so great that there's a group of people that are working so hard to achieve good sustainability and community outcomes in New York City. This question is directed towards Phoebe. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your experience at the Climate Works for All Coalition and what kind of work you guys do there.
Sure. Yeah, so the Climate Works for All Coalition is a coalition of community organizations from around New York City, labor unions, climate organizations, environmental justice organizations. And as I mentioned before, you know, WeAct and UHAB are both a part of this coalition, and both have played a really big role in helping us develop policy ideas and move this work forward and advocate for all of this. So, you know, what we do as a coalition is we try to move forward policy that advances our climate goals as a city, creates good jobs, invests in New York City communities, and moves us towards a just transition. And so in the past, we've worked on Local Law 97 and passed the Dirty Buildings Bill in 2019. And since then, we've been developing this equitable recovery platform where we've identified 7 different infrastructure project areas where we are calling for investment from the city. And, you know, they're not only climate jobs, they're not only going to move us towards our climate goals, but they're going to create 100,000 jobs for New Yorkers on the way. So we developed that policy ask, and now what we're doing is trying to make it happen by talking to our members of city council, by doing this mayoral forum, by trying to get out in front of the new candidates for city council and mayor. So it's the, you know, process of coming up with what we want to see happen in the city and then making it happen as a coalition, coming together, having press conferences, doing testifying at city council hearings that we're going to be doing this spring, having, when things are safe again, marches and rallies to make sure folks are hearing our voices, having community education events with folks to continue to hear input from community members and pull in more ideas, et cetera. So it's like creating a campaign to implement these policies that we're developing collectively.
Do you feel like it's been difficult to have like a cohesive message across all the different platforms that you guys operated in?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it comes down to our objectives. Like, we want to move towards our climate goals aggressively. We want to create aggressive climate policy. We want to create good jobs, good union jobs, and we want to invest in communities of color, environmental justice communities in New York City. So those are the basics of everything that we're doing. All the projects that we're working on fall within those categories. And that's what unites the organizations around the table that we're working with. So yes, we are asking for a lot right now, and it's broad and comprehensive. And some of the things that we're asking for in this spring are, some priorities from within that broad list. But it comes down to the basic goals and vision of the coalition of climate goals, job creation, investment in communities.
Thank you.
So someone asked a question in the chat, Warren. It's a policy question. I just wanted to read that out for all our panelists. The question is, what is being done to make sure that the governor and mayor enforce local law 97? If anybody wants to touch on that.
Yeah, so that's actually a part of our campaign as we're currently moving forward to hold accountable the commitments that the city has made with the enforcement of local law 97, making sure we're continuing to move forward with the law in the way that we organized to fight for it in the first place, which is prioritizing good job creation and making sure that environmental justice communities are protected. Something interesting that's happening right now is that the governor has a budget provision that would actually weaken local law 97 in the state budget that allows building owners to purchase renewable energy credits from upstate energy sources, which would allow more buildings to not retrofit because they can then purchase power elsewhere instead of doing the retrofits. And also, we know from experience that these policies aren't right for environmental justice communities because it results in more localized pollution in environmental justice communities where these retrofits aren't happening and these communities are still facing the same amount of emissions. So yeah, that's something that we're pushing back against the governor on now. And we sent a letter to the governor, and we are calling our legislators this week. So that's kind of like an example of how we're keeping on top of this and trying to move it forward. And I don't know if David, you had anything to add too.
Yeah, I guess I was just gonna add that, like on the ground, I guess, last year there was I guess what they calling a racial reckoning, or but basically a lot of the utilities and city agencies were kind of pressured to double down on help to the LMI community, LMI meaning low to moderate income residents, and so there's pressure from the general public to help low to moderate income folks and increase incentives for different utility programs and stuff. But just because there's more money being funneled into these programs, and I think also like what the Climate Works for All Coalition is trying to do is kind of try to get more money into these specific sectors. But sometimes the utilities and city agencies, they don't know what they're doing with this, I guess, market, right? With this sector of folks and buildings. And so some of the work that I do is try to help the utilities, help the city agencies talk to the community, because they don't do community engagement. Or if they do, to be honest, in my personal opinion, besides UHAB, outside of UHAB, is they suck at it. They don't know how to talk to the community. And so, not only is it important for the influx of cash to come into the folks that need it, there also needs to be an infrastructure to distribute those funds to the people that need to receive it, right? And so that being said, I guess also to address Paul's question, I work for a building nonprofit, or for a nonprofit that works with buildings. That's not necessarily a priority for this budgetary season with the Climate Works for All Coalition, but I completely support their position, because we need to be pushing whatever we can get and more, and so as far as like coalition kind of coming together, I think it's just we all have the very grounding sort of imperative that it's for the people on the ground, and it's for this larger effort, and it's not for each individual's mission. It's for this larger effort. And so I think that's how we work really well. And that's why we're able to get a lot of things done, I think, and hopefully get more things done in the future.
Awesome. So there's a few more questions in the chat. I just wanted to bring that out. Let me see if I can find it. So one question, I think one of our guests asked is, besides the bilingual and customer service skills that were mentioned, what other skills are required to be an organizer in the environmental field? If anybody wants to.
I would suggest like any like social skills, like public speaking, or like developing like skills in small talk or like connecting with people. And then also being able to write and communicate to different audiences. So being able to write in, you know, a professional manner where you can use jargon, or you can use, you know, kind of like expressing ideas differently. But like when you're communicating with like a general audience, or just like learning how to communicate differently, and like understanding everyone's like communication styles, and just being able to kind of transition and figure that out. But I think like the biggest thing is just communication.
Great. So have one more question, well, a few more. Someone's asking about sustainability consultant, inquiring about skills as a project manager, if anybody has any input on that.
I could jump on this one. I guess if you could clarify in the chat, are you a project manager that wants to get into sustainable consulting, or vice versa?
Oh yeah, they're asking how they can get into the sustainability consulting field.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that I thought for a long time I wanted to do as well. So I had an idea about it, but anyway, yeah, I think consultants really are, in my experience and with the consultants that I work with, really just kind of are project managers in the energy efficiency space. And it's very, very important for you to have those project manager skills. It's really that the title of sustainability consultant really comes with the company or organization that you are working for. A couple that come to mind right off the top of my head are Stephen Winters Associates, even Urban Green Council to some degree. ACEEE is also another good larger kind of think tank organization, but they also do some sort of consultant. But in general, it's just about being able to kind of connect the dots for a lot of the different clients, right? So if you have a building, for example, that kind of has no idea what to do or how to move forward in a certain project, but they know they want to do something sustainable. And it's about being able to gather all the programs or incentives or projects, pilots, and all that sort of stuff that's eligible for this particular client, and show them the ingredient or show them the menu of options that they could have, and really guide them in the right direction, even though you might have a personal opinion about where they should go. I think it's something that, at least the way I have to work, is we have to make sure that the folks are making the decisions themselves. But I think if you're a project manager right now, you are a sustainable consultant. It's just a matter of having that outward facing project management skill, and communication skill and just applying to those kind of sustainability oriented companies and organizations.
Okay, this question is for David. Has UHAB looked at the beneficial electrification system?
Yeah, we have we just launched our new Clean Heat for Co-ops campaign that is beneficial. It's for beneficial electrification. And so we work with cooperatives to see how they could beneficially electrify. And I guess that phrase is a little, I guess, like specific in my opinion, just because electrification is just the same thing. It's just beneficial electrification just means that there's a benefit to making things electric. And so, yes, we work with buildings. It's very difficult because heat pumps and other electric sort of heating and cooling technologies are pretty expensive because they're not, you don't have that market saturation, economies of scale to push down the price. There's also general distrust for heat pumps because they're not around, and they're like, why doesn't anybody have it? And nobody has it because nobody has it. And those that do have it, that bought it, you know, maybe 5-10 years ago, don't have the cold climate capable ones. And so, which means that they're just less efficient the colder the temperature gets, which isn't helpful when you want to stay warm when it's cold. Yeah, it's just a large hurdle of kind of general public disinformation, distrust, and high financial obstacles, right? So again, I work with limited equity cooperatives, low to moderate income residents. They don't have a lot of capital to spend, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a project. So how do we find them a loan that's going to be worth it for them in the long run based on the efficiency saving, cost savings, and different operational costs on the new system? Short answer is yes, we are working on that.
Thank you. I don't know if there were any of the other speakers or panelists that wanted to answer, you know, any of the questions that were already asked. I can't see everyone on top, so I can't see if you've unmuted yourself or not. No. All right. Well, then, you know, at this point, we would kind of break off and network and chat a little bit, but in this case, we can't. That being said, please feel free to share your, you know, LinkedIn information with one another. The Eventbrite also had a link to a lot of the, to most of the speakers' LinkedIn as well. It seems like they're very open to giving some advice or just having a little chit chat, you know, if they can. I realize that they're very busy doing amazing work for this city and their local communities. That being said, I'd like to, you know, urge you to follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram. As I mentioned in the beginning, we have a few events coming up. The next one being on community action, a little bit more subject matter. You may be discussing some of these like Local Law 97. Check it out. It's next Wednesday, and our next Green Careers panel will be led by Crystal, who is asking the questions, and it'll be on women and diversity. So if you're interested and you want to hear more about a career in that and hearing, you know, the struggles and the triumphs of, you know, being a woman and a diverse person in the sustainability field, please keep a lookout. Should be the second Tuesday in March. Again, thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you again to the panelists, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for being here.
And thank you, Louise, for moderating.
Yes, nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.